the SAMHSA Gain Center webinar entitled Self-Care for Criminal Justice Professionals Across the Sequential Intercept Model, or the SIM. Today we're going to talk about the considerations for Intercepts 0 through 2. I also want to just emphasize how incredibly important this topic is for everyone who works with or in the criminal justice system, and we're very excited to be bringing this webinar to you today. My name is Lisa Callahan, and I am the Senior Research Associate at Policy Research Associates, and I'm very happy to be moderating this today. The views, opinions, and content expressed in this presentation and discussion do not necessarily reflect the views, opinions, or policies of the Center for Mental Health Services, the Center for Substance Abuse Treatment, the Substance Abuse and Mental Health Services Administration, or the U.S. Department of Health and Human Services. Most of you should see that there is a Q&A box probably to your right of your screen. If you would please submit your questions to the presenters in the Q&A pod. The presenters will address as many of the questions as time permits at the end of the presentation. We will also be doing some polling, so when prompted, please respond to the open polls in the polling tab, and the results will be shared once the poll closes. We will be recording this webinar, and the slides will be disseminated in the days following the webinar. A certificate of attendance will be available for download at the end of the webinar. This certificate is for personal portfolio use only and is not eligible for CEU credits. We have arranged for ASL interpretation services during this meeting. The ASL interpreters for this meeting are Corey Bruner and Trudy Gilbert. For best visibility of the interpreters, we recommend the following changes to your WebEx layout. In the upper right-hand corner of the window, there'll be a tab that says Layout. First, hide non-video participants, and by doing that, click on Layout and then Hide non-video participants. Next, change your view to full screen, and you'll see that the instructions are there to click on Layout, full screen, view all participants in a floating view. We also have live captioning for today's event, and this is to enhance accessibility. To view live captioning, select the Accept button in the multimedia pod located in the lower right-hand corner of your WebEx screen. The color contrast of the live caption pod can be changed as needed, and the high contrast style is recommended for best visibility. I want to introduce the agenda for today. After I'm done going through the housekeeping slides, I'm going to introduce, Roxanne Castenada from SAMHSA. She's a public health advisor for the Center for Mental Health Services. That will be followed by our presentation with Major Darren Ivy and Connie Mealy. And at the end of their presentations, we will answer as many questions as possible and have some closing remarks. So I'd like to introduce Roxanne Castenada for some remarks from SAMHSA.
Hello, and welcome again to the SAMHSA Games webinar. I am Roxanne Castenada, and I manage the criminal justice portfolio for the community support programs of the Center for Mental Health Services here at SAMHSA. During this very difficult year of COVID and civil unrest, the challenge of caring for our professional self has increased dramatically. Our training has always emphasized or focused on caring for the person we are charged with assisting through a complex criminal justice system. There may or may not be formal programs in place to attend to the needs of the criminal justice professional. Major Darren Ivy and Connie Mealy join us today to discuss their experience and expertise in how to care for our professional selves, with emphasis on our interactions at the SIM Intercept 0 to 2. Please join me in welcoming them. Lisa?
Thank you, Roxanne. I would first like to introduce Major Darren Ivy. Major Ivy was appointed to the Kansas City, Missouri Police Department in September of 1992. He served as the department's CIT commander from 2012 through 2018, and through a partnership with the Truman Medical Center's Behavioral Health in Kansas City, Missouri, he led a team that developed a training program called Building Resilience, Surviving Secondary Trauma, to address the occupational risks of secondary trauma and acute stress. Since March of 2015, thousands of law enforcement and mental health professionals from across the country have completed the course. Major Ivy has an international critical incident stress certification for assisting individuals in crisis and group crisis intervention, and was an inaugural member of the first Commander Peer Support Group in the country. And additionally, he is the past co-chair of the Mid-American CIT Council and Justice Committee of the Resilient KC Initiative, and was the Missouri State CIT Self-Care Chair from 2016 to 2018. Major Ivy also serves on the advisory board for the Campaign for Trauma-Informed Policy and Practice and Pause First Project. Prior to becoming a police officer, Major Ivy was a proud member of the United States Air Force, where he served in support of Operation Desert Storm and is a graduate of the FBI National Academy. Connie Mealy, who is a psychiatric mental health advanced practice registered nurse and has spent more than 30 years in the field working to advance the treatment of addiction. In 2015, she was selected as one of 25 nurses from across the country as a Robert Wood Johnson Public Health Nurse Leader due to her work on the integration of physical and behavioral health issues. Among her numerous accomplishments, providing treatment to patients and teaching new PMH nursing students in 2006, Connie also stepped forward to address the challenges facing incarcerated people struggling with mental health issues. Connie formed a task force of criminal justice officials to work together and develop an algorithm to identify appropriate jail diversion steps, ranging from what police personnel can do when they encounter a person with mental illness or substance use disorder, to helping people struggling to find permanent housing. She was involved in the development of a CIT training program for police officers and detention personnel to better support those they encounter with mental health, substance use, and developmental disabilities. To date, more than 1,300 officers have been trained. She retired in 2018 as the Assistant Public Health Director for Mecklenburg County, which is Charlotte, North Carolina. She is now opened her own counseling and consulting practice, working with people and their families who suffer from addictions as well as other life issues. She developed a leadership development program based on her more than 20 years of leadership in nonprofit and government sectors. Before I turn over the microphone to our speakers, I just want to give an indication of the people who are attending today. As a result of our polling, we have the largest representation is from urban areas, followed by suburban and rural, but happily people are represented from all of those different designations. Let's see. We have professional representatives from community-based programs, from government programs, also from crisis service providers, corrections, probation, and a number of other professional designations. So the sequential intercept model is something that many of you are probably familiar with, and this really is the structural foundation for the webinar that we're having today. While we're focusing on self-care across the SIM with focuses on Intercepts 0, 1, and 2, and wanted to just give you an overview of the SIM model. It is a conceptual framework that was developed by PRA, and the model is a linear map of points across the criminal justice system where individuals come into contact with different criminal justice professionals and can be potentially diverted out of the system. The intercepts are Intercept 0, which refers to community services. Intercept 1 refers to law enforcement. Intercept 2 is the initial detention and initial court hearings. Intercept 3 are the jails and the courts. Intercept 4 is reentry, and Intercept 5 refers to community corrections. I wanted to identify also a couple of stressors that exist at each of these intercepts, but we all know that there are many more than just that. These are just a couple of examples. At Intercept Zero, we often have dispatchers are the first people who come into contact with someone in distress, and as well as EMS technicians and firefighters, et cetera, and they respond to a person. Each of them is responding to a person who is in a crisis, such as an overdose, in accidents, or other kinds of witnessing people who are undergoing stressful situations. Law enforcement also comes into contact with a number of people who have just experienced some traumatic events, severe symptoms of mental illness, and substance use disorder may be exacerbated by that. They also come into contact often with when arresting people who have mental health and substance use disorder because no other community resources are available. The mobile crisis teams or co-responder teams face a number of challenges themselves of getting people into crisis beds or services that are at or beyond capacity. And also in the times we're in right now, potentially being exposed to COVID while responding to calls in the community. The jail security and medical staff also have to navigate a lot of safety and security precautions when they're incarcerating people, especially people today who are diagnosed or might have COVID when they're coming into the jail. They also, a lot of their work involves witnessing an individual who's experiencing severe mental health or substance use withdrawal. So with that overview of the SIM and some of the stressors at the intercepts that we're discussing today, I would like to introduce first Major Darren Ivy, who will be presenting the first part of our webinar today. Major Ivy.
Thank you very much, Lisa, and thank you for having both Connie and I to talk about this important topic. Just so everybody knows, Connie and I are going to be switching back and forth throughout the presentation. You should have no problem identifying who's who, but we don't want to confuse you, so you may hear Connie and then you may hear me. And then let's talk a little bit about today. We've all chosen a profession that is full of stress and trauma. We knew that when we signed up for it, and that's why this self-care is so important, and I'm so glad that we are taking the time today to talk a little bit about it. It doesn't matter which intercept you're in. What we talk about today is applicable to you. The tools we'll give you, doesn't matter if you're rural, urban, suburban, it's all going to apply, so that's the good news. And then the worst part about this entire thing is we talk about the job we signed up for being stressful, but I don't think any of us expected 2020 to happen. And as we know, that's been quite the year between the COVID and the protests and riots in certain cities, and then the elections that we had going on, the money and the health impacts from the COVID situation all affecting us. So hopefully you will get some tools today that are easy to use that will help you in your daily activities. I'm going to start off by a quote that Connie actually uses in her presentations, and I am quite happily going to steal it. I already told her, because this is so impactful. Self-care is giving the world the best of you instead of what's left of you. Just think about that for a minute, how powerful that actually is, because how many of us actually do that? How many of us actually give those we love, especially, not only those we serve, but those we love, the best of us instead of what's left of us? And I do have to tell you that because the job you signed up for, it's really your professional responsibility to ensure that you are giving those we serve the best of us. And hopefully these tools that we talked about today are going to help you do just that. What we're going to try to cover, and it's going to be a lot of information, just so you know, we've designed these slides to have all that information. We may not cover it all, but you will have an opportunity to get the slides later, so that's why we put the information on there. But we're going to cover the professional quality of life. We're going to talk about stress. We're going to talk about trauma. And then most importantly, we're going to give you tools, easy tools and strategies and resources that you can use for these to help combat the stress and the trauma. So let's start off talking about the professional quality of life. Anytime I do any presentations on stress or trauma, I always start off with the Proqual, Professional Quality of Life Scale. This is a free tool that you can download, and use. We recommend you do it every 90 days or so. But in the simple little 30 questions, it's going to tell you how you're doing in your professional quality of life. So what exactly is a professional quality of life? It's the quality we feel in relations to the work as a helper. And that's pretty much all of us on this call are going to be as we are helpers. And both the positive and the negative aspects of your job are going to influence this. And that's why you'll see on the scale we have compassion satisfaction, compassion fatigue, burnout, and secondary trauma. The compassion satisfaction being the positive, the compassion fatigue, burnout, and secondary trauma being the negative. This Proqual in 30 simple questions, I always tell people it's very simple. It will tell you how you're doing on this scale. So I get to start off with the fun one, which is compassion satisfaction. It's that feeling you get for doing your job well, that sense of fulfillment and for making a difference. It's when your job makes you feel invigorated. That's compassion satisfaction. Also, you may hear me talk about having your batteries charged, your pitcher completely filled. That's an all sign that your compassion satisfaction is high. How many of you, if you think about it, actually look forward to going to work on a daily basis? I remember when I first started this job, that's all I looked forward to. I wanted to go to work. I hated days off because I was so excited to go. And then about year 3 or so, that really started changing, and it became more of a job than a passion. How many of you still smile when you go to work and when you're at work? How many have had family members tell you, Daddy, son, brother, sister, when are you going to retire? You really need to retire. When you start hearing words like that, then you're really falling out of compassion and satisfaction and into the next stage that Connie's getting ready to talk to. But remember, just because you're in compassion, you're not in compassion satisfaction anymore, doesn't mean you can't get back there. And that Proqual will let you know when you're starting to slide from compassion satisfaction side over to the compassion fatigue side.
Thank you, Darren. And I think you did a great job of showing and describing what compassion satisfaction is. For all of the reasons that you stated, I think we are all at a much greater have a much greater chance of developing compassion fatigue these days, working many more hours, having more things expected of us. I mean, there's the regular job duties, and then on top of that, when you add COVID and what you may have to do when coming into contact with someone, it can be very stressful. We've been hearing more about compassion fatigue in the last 5 years, and, essentially it's, having a diminished ability to empathize or feel compassion for others, for those that we're coming into contact with. And that's not just the people that we serve. That's also the people we work with, certainly other aspects of the community, and as Darren was saying, most importantly, our families as well. And it's, where we get to the point where we feel like we can't provide the services that we signed up to serve, that when you, decided to enter the profession that you did, what your hopes and dreams were about that, and beginning to feel like you can't do that anymore. You're barely getting the bare minimum done. And so you begin to experience compassion fatigue. So, the secondary trauma can cause compassion fatigue. And again, I'm not going to read slides to you, but again, it's a loss of sense of empathy, and it's an internalization of pain and suffering. And, we all witness a lot of pain and suffering in the work that we do. One of the things we used to talk about in our CIT training is, people don't call you when they're having a good day. They call you when, for many of them, it's the worst day of their entire life. And so, again, what we witness and what we see can certainly have traumatic effects on the work that we do. So I wanted to share with you some symptoms that we see pretty commonly with people who have secondary or vicarious trauma. And again, that's from observing trauma of the people that we serve or that we're in contact with. And lower concentration, many people talk about, feeling a little more foggy. They can't concentrate as well. They're distracted. Rigid thinking, that everything is very black and white, that there's no gray. Perfectionism, which we'll talk about shortly, and then certainly the preoccupation with trauma. The next one talks about, physical symptoms, your increased heart rate, difficulty breathing. You could have anxiety attacks and have difficulty breathing. The impaired immune system. We tend to see people are sick more often. People who don't typically get colds and flu end up having more of those and are out a lot. And then we hear people talking about the problems with stomach upset, heartburn, those kinds of things. We also see people having more medical problems and having to seek medical services. Emotional symptoms, these are pretty self-explanatory, but we're looking at feeling guilty because we didn't do enough, or angry because the system is set up to not be supportive of what we do. We can become numb to what's going on because it's kind of like, what's the use? I'm trying very hard to do what I need to do, and, it's not being noticed, or I may be having issues with fellow workers about what I'm trying to do. The sadness, the helplessness, again, all of those, I think, equal hopelessness. We begin to feel hopeless about what we're doing. And so burnout is a little different from compassion fatigue. It's, again, emotional exhaustion, and it can have a withdrawal aspect as far as how you are doing your job, and feeling institutional stress, that there's a lot of things expected of you and they just continue to pile things on. And then the other important difference is that it is not trauma related, but it makes you feel, again, hopeless, constant fatigue, overworked, underappreciated. As Darren was talking about, lack of enthusiasm for your work, no longer feeling like you can make a difference, and so very discontented. So Maslow developed a Burnout Inventory, and it is a 22 question questionnaire, and it takes about 10 minutes to complete, and it covers these three areas: the overwhelming feeling of exhaustion, the feelings of cynicism and detachment, and the sense of ineffectiveness and lack of accomplishment. So, if you are wondering whether you're burned out, this would be a great test to take. It's easy to take, and it's easy to score. So perfectionism, I'm a nurse. You all are in different aspects of law enforcement. I think sometimes we work very hard to be perfect, to do our jobs perfectly, and to act perfect, as this says. And sometimes that's because we are trying to minimize unhappy feelings that we have: blame, judgment, shame. And for many people, it began in childhood, and a pattern of behavior developed about helping other people and feeling good when we helped other people and when we were of service to other people. And we did that partly for acceptance from our parents and other adults who were important in our life. And so sometimes the perfectionism, as we talked about earlier, comes about too, where if someone asked you who you are, you would say, I'm an EMT, I'm a dispatcher, I'm a police officer, I'm a nurse. Well, that's what we do for a living. That's not who we are. Yet we begin to lose sight of that, and it becomes very entwined of not only what we do for a living, but who we are. And part of being a perfectionist, having a strong need for control. And again, we know that on a daily basis, every human being has control over two things: what we do, how we act, and how we respond to what happens to us. Those are the only two things that we actually have control over on a daily basis. And so when we're trying to control other things, we get frustrated, angry, exasperated, depressed, because we can't control them. But in fact, we can do the footwork, and we can certainly try to have the outcome become what we want. But the bottom line is we only have control over those two things. Having a sense of failure, feeling that you have to do more and more all of the time to continue that perfectionism. And when you complete the things that you have on your list, then you add other things to it, because it's a never-ending hamster wheel, for lack of a better word, because there's always more to be done. And so never satisfied, always doing more.
Thank you, Connie. Man, I don't know about everybody else in the panel or the participant today, but perfectionist is definitely me to a T. And I will tell anybody out there that while those traits are often great for your career advancement, they become nightmares for you, for your people as you as a supervisor when you have those same expectations. And more importantly, really helps destroy your family relationships and your friends' relationships when you have those same expectations. So thank you for that great information, Connie. So on the Proqual, we talked, not the Proqual, I'm sorry, the professional quality of life. Remember, there was two parts underneath compassion fatigue. One of them was the burnout, which Connie just talked about. And the second part is the secondary trauma. Secondary trauma, you see the definition up there in the first bullet point. I always kind of make the Cliff Note version to say it's basically being exposed to and affected by the trauma of others. And if you think about it, that's what our job is. We are constantly exposed to and affected by the trauma of others. And then its symptoms mimic those of post-traumatic stress. Now, you notice there's not a disorder at the last part of that word, post-traumatic stress disorder. I will use that term just for a minute because we use that in our trainings to help keep people in the right frame of mind. But we try to get them out of using the word disorder after that training is done with, because a disorder causes a lot of stigma. Nobody wants to admit they have a disorder. Even more so is to have PTSD, that's a medical diagnosis. You have to, there's a scale, you have to fill out a survey, and then you have to meet certain criteria, and you have to go through an interview with a trained professional, and that's all before you have post-traumatic stress disorder. But the signs and symptoms of post-traumatic stress are the exact same thing, whether you have the disorder or not. So when we do the trainings regarding this, I always ask people, tell me some signs and symptoms of PTSD or PTS for the future reference. And these are always the most common answers I get. Irritability, sleep issues, avoidance, shame and guilt. The risky behaviors, I want to talk a little bit about that because normally we'll talk about dissociation. We're not going to talk about that today. But because of what we're exposed to on a constant basis, we often get to a point where we feel like the best way to get through our day is just to shut our emotions off. And we become professionals at shutting our emotions off. And after a while, we forget how to turn our emotions back on. So we end up going home, and our family doesn't want to be around us because we're this emotionless zombie, or we're lashing out at them because we forget what compassion feels like anymore. So that risky behavior comes in effect because we're so, after a while of shutting those emotions off and leaving them off, we're tired of feeling numb. And when we start feeling numb, we look for anything that makes us feel excited, that same excitement and then adrenaline rush we get when we go to work every day or answer those hot calls. The other two I want to talk about real quick are avoidance. I am the king of avoidance as far as avoiding large crowds. I don't like it to this day. It's one I still try to work on, but I will avoid it at all costs. And then shame, and the shame of our feelings. So today, Connie and I are really going to do our best to normalize these things for everybody. We want you to realize that everything you feel is a normal reaction to a very unnormal situation you're exposed to. And to get the help you're going to need to recognize that these are just normal feelings. Now, I told you that these are the lists I get. It's important to know that, because if you look at that and say, how many am I affected by? Well, I would tell you, except for suicidal thoughts, I can put a check mark by every single thing you see on that list. But I don't have PTSD. I know that for a fact because I constantly do screenings just to make sure. I can always tell people, hey, I don't have PTSD, but I still suffer from these signs and symptoms, these symptoms of post-traumatic stress. So it doesn't matter if you have been diagnosed as having PTSD or not, you still have these things in your life that need to be addressed. And that's what we're going to try to do today. Excuse me, folks, I'm having a problem here. All right, so we're going to talk a little bit about coming up with the stress and the human stress response. That's the next part we want to touch into. So let's talk a little bit about that, the stress and the stress response. Stress is not always bad. It's our body's way of responding to any kind of demand or threat, but that doesn't mean it's always bad. If you think about it, stress is also what keeps you sharp. It's what motivates you to do well. It's what it wants you to advance in your career if that's what you like to do. That stress is driving you to do that. It's when we start to overwhelm our bodies that it becomes actually not helpful anymore. It actually becomes more harmful. So after a while, when you start touching this stage, and it doesn't matter if it's real or imagined, your defense system kicks in, and that's your human stress response. You notice it says real or imagined. After a while of doing this job for 30 some odd years now, I will tell you that at times, if I get overly stressed out, let's say putting a piece of furniture together and something's not working and it's just everything's colliding in my world, I will just absolutely lose it, and you'll see parts flying and the words you hear may come out of my mouth, and you would swear that I am in a life-threatening situation by the way my system has kicked in. But it's not that way. It's actually that imagined piece. It's just my system has been tripped so often that it starts losing the ability to differentiate. And that's going to start affecting things like our productivity, our relationships, and most importantly, our quality of life. So I talked about the human stress response. We've all heard of fight, flight, or freeze. I use a model that we came across when we put our training together many years ago that actually has the appease portion of it as well. So this is your human stress response is basically your thing you were born with to survive. In a life-threatening condition, your body naturally is going to want to fight or flee, and then you have the freeze and appease. So look at what's on the screen right now. See which one you are naturally. Are you somebody that if somebody came up and pointed a gun in your face, you're going to automatically fight them? Or are you going to automatically run away? Or are you somebody who's not going to do anything at all? You're just going to be completely paralyzed by the shock or the fear. Or are you going to be that fourth person who is automatically going to try to tend and befriend somebody, try to get them, rationalize with them, oh, don't hurt me, you're fine, everything's going to be good, I'll do what I want to you. It's important you know what the natural one is, because in our career fields, we usually undergo quite a bit of training, in my case, 7 months of a police academy, that trains my natural one, which is appeasing, I'm an appeaser naturally, into a fighter, because I have to be in this career field. But if you don't realize what your natural one is and can take steps to mitigate the stress response, which Connie's going to talk about coming up, then that natural one will appear sooner or later, and it's usually going to be at the most inopportune time that you don't want it to appear at that time. So kind of take a look at what might be, and then Connie will start covering a little bit about the stress response, and then some great tools that can help mitigate the response.
Thanks, Darren. So in addition to those four, we also know that for some people, disassociation can be a stress response. We see this a lot of times with people who have been traumatized sexually, physically, emotionally. And, you know, again, it's disconnecting from the moment that you're in. The mind interprets that this is way too much for it to handle, and it just kind of shuts down an aspect of the almost conscious part of the brain. And so, again, the person has disassociated. And the other is collapse, and that's part of a vasovagal syncope process that occurs in your brain. And, again, you can see where people are sick, pass out. And, again, you know, whether you've experienced this or very possibly the people that you're interacting with may have experienced this. And it's the brain's way of trying to protect itself or protect the person. So just, you know, as a nurse, I could go on for hours about the brain and how it works and what happens with fear and stress. But let me just give you a little bit of context for this. So you'll see on the left side the prefrontal cortex, and it is across, you know, the front of your head, your forehead. It has lots of different names. I typically refer to it as the command center. You know, it's the thing that tells you I have to get up at 6 o'clock today because I have to be at work at 8, and so I have to leave at 7 because I live in Charlotte and the traffic sucks in Charlotte. So therefore, you know, I've got to leave an hour early to, you know, go 15 miles. And so, you know, that is your command center. It's the thing, you know, that says somebody's birthday's coming up, you know, Christmas is coming. It is the thing that keeps us doing what we need to do. It's kind of the planning part of the brain. It sees into, you know, it has a futuristic side. It helps you solve problems. And it actually has the power to overrule your limbic system, which is also where your amygdala is located. And so, again, you know, if you're having issues at work and you're trying to solve a problem, you're using your prefrontal cortex. Now, over to your amygdala, which is, you see on the right side, known as the lizard or the reptilian brain, is what we usually refer to it as. And it's all about survival, interpreting whether a situation is dangerous. It's about safety, wanting to keep you safe. And it can take over the rest of your brain if you're in a very heightened, stressful situation. But again, remember, I told you that your prefrontal cortex has the ability to overrule the limbic system and the amygdala, depending on the situation. So again, part of this has to do with also where you interpret the stress and how you feel about it. And we'll talk a little bit about how you can move from your amygdala limbic side of your brain more towards your prefrontal cortex in this situation. But let me turn it back over to Darren for right now.
Thanks, Connie. And you know, the scary thing about this, folks, is, and it's something you need to be very aware of, is in our career field, these life-threatening conditions are, when they happen, they're not very long in duration. So if you think about a shootout, and most police officers who are involved in shootouts will tell you that it felt like 3 years, when in fact it may have only been 3 to 5 seconds. Or then you see somebody on the news where you see a police officer kicking a handcuffed suspect, even though there's helicopters broadcasting this on live TV, and we ask ourselves, how did that possibly happen? Why would they do something like this? Are they not in their right mind? And that's exactly what's going on, is they're not in their prefrontal cortex. They're still operating out of their amygdala in that complete survival mode, even though they don't need to survive anymore. They need to get back to that prefrontal cortex, and that's why the tool that Connie's talking about very, very shortly, coming right up, is so important for us, because it's so simple and it helps us get back to where we need to as quickly as possible. So we talked about stress already, and now we're going to really talk about the effects of it. There's a lot of physical and emotional effect of chronic stress that has on your body. We already talked about after a while how your nervous system can't really figure out the difference between emotional and physical. It starts treating it the same way. How it's going to disrupt every system in your body. And more importantly, what I didn't know until I started doing some training on this a while ago is not only does it affect your digestive, reproductive, and heart area, but it actually speeds up the aging process. And if you never really thought about that, think about presidents of the United States. And if you're anything like me, where you've looked at a president like 4 years goes by and you haven't realized 4 years go by until you see a side-by-side picture of what they look like when they entered office and what they look like after they left office. And the difference is just amazing how much they've aged. I look at some of the pictures of myself and the same thing will come in. I can tell when I've had a very stressful year because one picture from a year ago, thanks to Facebook memories or Google photo memories popping up all the time, you realize how tough of a year it's been when you see how much you've aged. In other years, you look back and say, I feel like I hardly aged at all. So it's important to know that how this affects your body because we want to find a way to lessen that effect. So let's look at a few more of the health problems that are actually caused or made worse by stress. And I'm going to cover a couple of them. I'm going to see if Connie wants to add a couple. But one of the ones I will talk about is reproductive issues. There's a reason for that because as part of our human stress response, your body's actually sending cortisol through your entire system. And cortisol's purpose is one of the purposes is to shut down or diminish parts of your body that you don't need to survive a stressful situation. Things like your sex drive or reproductive system, your digestive system. Those are things you don't need to survive a very life-threatening condition at that time. But the problem is that cortisol remains in your system for a long period of time. And in our career fields, no matter if you're in dispatch, correction, fire, EMS, police, you have a stress response that's being triggered many more times a day than an average person out in the world may have. It's triggered how many times a month, and you're usually going off that many times a day. So that's one of the issues. Another one is thinking or memory problems. There's a reason behind that as well because chronic stress affects your hippocampus of your brain, and that's that short-term memory saver for you. So, and there's something called a cognitive load theory, which is much more talked about in the education world, but I'm trying to bring it to our career field as well, because the more stress you have and it starts overloading that hippocampus, you stop remembering a lot of these things that you used to remember all the time. And if this can be something as simple as you need to go to the grocery store after work, and you have a very small list in your head, and by the time you got done with that shift, you go to the grocery store, you walk through the door, and you can't even remember one thing off of that list. That's a cognitive load theory in effect right there. Connie, you want to talk about on that?
Actually, to just expound on the cortisol aspect, we know that having too much cortisol in your system can cause anxiety and depression, headaches, heart disease, and as you were just talking about, Darren, memory and concentration issues. It's really not healthy to have a lot of cortisol pumping through your body for long lengths of time. So again, more reason why we need to be able to deal with our stress more effectively and efficiently.
And I will say, folks, a good little study came out of England about 2 years ago that talks about you're never going to get rid of stress or the cortisol in your system just instantaneously. It has to work its way through. But two things you can do for yourself to help get it out of your system quicker is drink a lot of water, keep your body very hydrated, and then also exercise. And I don't want to go much more into the exercise because in some of the tools Connie and I are going to go over with you coming up, that's one of it, and I'll spend a little time on it there. So what are some other signs and symptoms of stress overload? We talked about the memory problems up front, but seeing only negative, I'm going to key in on that one. How many of you have coworkers that you don't want to be around them because everything is negative? There is no such thing as a positive in the world. Glass is always not even half full. It's like completely full. Everything is negative, 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 negative. Now, the good news is in social media, things like Facebook, when that appears, there's a simple little button that's very powerful to your self-worth and your happiness, and that is called unfollow or block. Unfortunately, in real life, you do not get to go around and start unfollowing and blocking people. That would be nice, but you can't do that. So I try to avoid hanging around people that all they see is the negative, and we'll talk about the opposite of that as one of our tools coming up. The other thing I'd like to talk about is the feeling overwhelmed. It goes very hand in hand with the burnout that Connie talked about. So I constantly am doing that burnout assessment because I know that as that perfectionist, that I'm always on the edge of burnout, and that feeling of being overwhelmed all the time can just overpower me at times. Connie, anything you want to add?
I think just to expound on the loneliness and isolation, I think the more stressed that we become and the more difficulty we have in handling it and don't feel like we can talk about it, and, you know, we look at our coworkers and they don't seem to be stressed, and so it must be me. There must be something wrong with me that I can't handle it like everybody else does. And therefore we typically don't talk about it, which makes us internalize it, and then also leads us to isolating ourselves. And, you know, I don't know about y'all, but for me, you know, after a particularly stressful day coming home, I don't even want to talk about it. I don't really want to talk at all. I, you know, really just want to be quiet. And, you know, try to let it go. And so, you know, it's easy to begin to start to isolate because, again, we're, you know, cutting ourselves off from our feelings because of the things that we see in the work that we do. And in the beginning when we do that, we're still able to reconnect with our feelings. But I think over time, we lose that ability to reconnect when we leave work. And so we just kind of go within ourselves and suffer in silence. So we really need to be aware of that loneliness and isolation aspect. Thanks, Darren.
So we're going to continue on, folks. I know it all looks like bad news, but it's important for you to recognize these signs and symptoms because it could be you, and you may say, holy smokes, that's what's going on with me. I thought it could have been something else. So here's some more signs and symptoms. I'll talk about a couple things, the constipation, diarrhea, nausea, dizziness, and then also the frequent cold or flus. But almost this entire list can also be linked back to that cortisol. Remember what cortisol does. It shuts down or diminishes parts of your system that you do not need to survive a situation. And our reproductive system and our digestive system are just two of those things that it decides it's going to do that with. So that obviously explains why many of these things are possibly on the list. Connie, any on this one you want to talk about?
Well, of course, I'd want to talk about using alcohol and cigarettes or drugs to relax. And, you know, that becomes a very easy coping mechanism and coping skill. You know, for people who may have a genetic predisposition to developing a substance use disorder, you know, that can be a dangerous place to walk. And so you really do need to look at, you know, what is a healthier way to deal with the stress that you're under, because again, people typically use alcohol or drugs, cigarettes, and we don't even have caffeine on here. And, you know, that would be because I probably wouldn't want to talk about that because I still have an issue with caffeine. You know, the idea is that I'm using this to either change how I feel because I feel so bad, or to numb myself so I don't feel anything at all. And so again, as I described earlier in the scenario, you come home from work and you just drink until you pass out, or you smoke weed, or, take something to help you relax. And then, what happens over time is you have to take more as you develop a tolerance. So again, we have to learn healthier ways to take care of ourselves so that we can be the best that we can be, that we want to be. Thanks, Darren.
And I'll tell you what, folks, if I ever have to put caffeine on this list, you do not want to be around me, because that is my one go-to that I always use. I love my coffee, and something's wrong about decaffeinated coffee. It just doesn't taste the same. All right, so we talked about bad. This is stress. Too much stress is harmful. We've heard that our entire life. We gave you some signs and symptoms of what to look for so you know if you're going into stress overload. So let's get to the most important part of this presentation on stress, and that is what can we do to actually help mitigate some of that reaction that our body's having. Have you ever asked yourself or thought, why is it that Darren can handle stress so much better and Connie can't? Or Connie does a much better job of doing it and Darren can't? Well, that's because we all have different things in our lives that are helping us deal with it, help build up a tolerance level for how we are actually going to deal with the stress. So let's talk about some of those. And in fact, we may go over all these real quick because they're ones that are so important to us. So a support network. A strong network of supportive friends and family is a huge buffer for stress. Now, notice how I say supportive. You do not want that negative Ned or negative Nancy or Debbie Downer in that group. You want a strong, supportive group of friends and family. Your sense of control. Let's think about as type A personalities, which many of us are in the career field we've chosen, we want to control things. And even a human being wants to control things. That sense of lack of control is so scary. And Southwest Airlines, I always tell my folks when I train is I think they're experts at this, because if you ever flown Southwest Airlines, even before they hit their patch of rough air, they're on the intercom. The captain is in a very calm voice saying, listen, folks, we're getting ready to go through some patch of air that's going to cause a lot of turbulence. It should only last 3 to 4 minutes. I'm going to try to climb out of it, but just so you know, it's going to be a little bumpy. Everything will be fine. I'll let you know when we're out of it. Well, I'll tell you what, for someone who hates flying like I do, that little bit of control back in my life makes things incredible to be able to deal with that stressful situation. Your attitude and outlook. Remember we talked about that negative person? Well, you want to be optimistic. If you are hopeful and optimistic, you will be less vulnerable to stress and the effects of stress. And then Connie, any you want to talk about or add on to?
I think to piggyback on what you were saying in regards to our attitudes and our outlooks, I mean, I think we all can relate to having something, awful, bad, however you want to describe it, happen to us, which really just kind of shook our belief of goodness in the world and rightness in the world, and whether it's moral or ethical, and having that expectation that, life is fair. And I think we all know that, life isn't fair, but there's a big difference in living my life with the attitude that, life isn't fair, everyone's out to, screw everybody else, it's a bad world, everybody is bad in it, nobody can be trusted, to have that attitude, or to have the attitude of, life isn't fair, but I'm still going to continue to do things the way that I know that they need to be done and the way I want them to be done. And in some ways, even, the golden rule of living, of management, whatever you want to call it, of treating people the way that you would like to be treated. And so, again, our attitude has a big impact in how we feel each and every day and how we interpret what happens to us. so that, we have the ability to look at things differently if we choose.
And then I'll close off on this one on knowledge and preparation, because if you think about the COVID situation that has gone on for the last year now, at least it feels like a year, it's only been 9 months, but think about how stressful that was when we started. And then as we gained more knowledge and we prepared more and we took the precautions, how much easier it got. And then it would get more scary again when we saw a different age group was impacted. But then we got more knowledge on, okay, it's often more these people at high risk, then here's more things you can do. I think that's a perfect example of how that knowledge and preparation helps you deal with that stress. So please take a look at these later on if you didn't have time to really think about them, because they're a huge way that you can help buffer some of that stress. So let's talk about our ability to handle that stress. And Connie, I'm actually going to let you start off, since I often take yours when you want to talk about. So is there anyone you want to talk off on this one first?
Well, I think, the learning how to relax, there are lots of different things that you can do, and we're going to talk about a couple of them. But really the importance of that, the importance of being quiet, of meditation. And when I'm talking about meditation, I'm not necessarily saying, sitting in a lotus position and humming, as many people typically think about meditation. Meditation is really about just being quiet and within yourself to kind of sense where you are and how you're doing. And you can do that, taking a walk in the woods, taking your dog for a walk. You can do that in the wee hours of the morning when you first get up, or get up a half hour before the rest of your household and have a quiet moment with your cup of coffee. There's lots of different meditation books or thought for the day books. And one of the things that those provide people is the ability to develop a intention for the day. What is my intention for today? What is my hope for today? Where can I make a difference and what can I do? And it's the same with at the end of the day. Is working out at the end of the day something that allows you to work off your stress, where someone else really wants or needs to work out in the morning? It's really about what is relaxing for you. Is vegging, as they say, in front of the TV, where the TV's on, but you're not really watching it, you're really thinking about other things. What is it that allows you to calm down and take a deep breath for the day? So, Darren?
As Connie talked about, get moving. A lot of these same things we're giving you are asking you to talk about traumatic stress. It'll also be the same tools. So get moving. I told you that British study. I also want to refer to exercise. And the good thing that came out of that was we've always been told, hey, you need to do 30 minutes of exercise. And that's the benchmark. But the study actually came out and said that if you can't fit in 30 minutes a day, that if you can just get in 120 to 150 minutes a week, so maybe you cram them all in 2 days over the weekend, it's almost as beneficial for your body as if you had done the 30 minutes each day. So that's good news for those of you who are really, really busy. The other part of the study it talked about was it does say, though, if you're going to use exercise as a way to handle stress after a busy day or a stressful day, you need to work about 80% max capacity. In other words, you don't want to run as fast as you can, like you're training for something, or lift as much weight as you can, because your body may think that it's actually back into a stressful situation and start secreting those stress response hormones all over again. So just about 80%, and you can just find your time. The other one thing I want to talk about real quick is connecting to others, which is the second one. Part of your stress response hormones release is actually something called oxytocin. And there's a great information out there, but one of the things oxytocin does is it helps repair the damage to the heart that the cortisol that can affect it over and over again. It's released naturally, but to get the abundance you really need, one of the things you can do is connect to others. You're wired to biologically reach out to somebody who is undergoing a stressful or traumatic event, just like you are wired to reach out for help yourself. So if you can connect to others, that just benefits you even more by releasing that oxytocin into your system. So Connie talked about the learning how to relax and the yoga and the breathing, and she is actually going to do that right now as I get on the right screen. So Connie, I'm going to turn it over to you for the breathing exercise.
Sure. Thanks, Darren. What you have in front of you is one example of a abdominal diaphragmatic breathing relaxation opportunity. I'm going to do something a little different, and that way you'll have two types of things that you can do. So mine is basically based on the numbers 4, 7, and 8. And so what it is that you breathe in for 4, you hold it for 7, and you breathe out for 8. You exhale for 8. What you will find, unless you're really very fit, that breathing out for 8 you may have not enough air in your lungs to do it for a full 8 counts. But over time, you will develop that. What's important about this exercise is it helps move from your sympathetic nervous system to your parasympathetic nervous system. Again, going back to the brain, it's helping us move from our limbic and amygdala system into more our prefrontal cortex. In other words, it's helping us relax. And so the important thing is when you exhale, if you can, kind of make that, sound as you exhale. Now, of course, if you're with a bunch of people and you don't want to be obvious that that's what you're doing, you don't have to do that. But let's just take a moment and do that. So you want to inhale for 4, hold it for 8, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. I'm sorry, and it's 7, and exhale for 8. So 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. And again, what you're doing is you're signaling to your brain that we're relaxing, we're getting to the parasympathetic part of our brain. So again, 4, 7, 8, very simple to remember. Breathe in for 4, hold it for 7, and breathe out for 8. So I hope you'll try that. And I'd love to hear if it works for you. So, Darren?
Thanks, Connie. I will tell you, folks, that this is my go-to, and this is what I tell everybody who leaves my training. If they take nothing else, take this simple breathing exercise, because we think we've been breathing right our entire life, and the only time that was true was when we were a baby. And when you watch a baby breathe, you see that little belly go up and down. That's the way diaphragmatic breathing works, and that is how you get from that amygdala back to that prefrontal cortex. So it's something I've taught in my trainings and to all my officers after a traumatic event. I will tell you, we've even done this as a police department in Kansas City for the last 2 years as part of our firearms qualification. And after 2 years of doing this, we have seen our scores on the qualifications increase dramatically, and our unqualified scores also be reduced dramatically. Why? Because qualifying, believe it or not, even though you may do it a couple of times a year, is a very stressful situation. So we did a nice little study on that turned out very well. All right, so we talked about stress, chronic stress. We gave you a couple things to look out for, a couple tools you can use. So now let's go into trauma and traumatic stress. We're going to kind of go through these a little bit quicker as we're running short on time. But when we talk about trauma, I like to use the Bessel-van der Kolk definition, where he says traumatization occurs when both your internal and external resources are inadequate to cope with the external threat. And when I first heard that, I wasn't sure I liked that definition. It sounded a little academic to me. But the more I got into this, it became the perfect definition. Because if you think about it, we all have internal and external resources. We all have them. They're different for everybody, and the amount you have are different for everybody. But there's something we can't control. But the one thing in this career field we cannot control is that external threat. You cannot control who you're going to be sent on a call for. You cannot control who is going to be sent to the correction system that you're going to have to deal with. You cannot control who's going to call in and ask for a police or medical response. Those are things you cannot control. So if you're constantly being traumatized or have traumatic stress from a result of these things, then you need to look at your internal and external resources. And during our 4-hour training, we often list these out, and these are the most popular answers. So when I ask you what some of your internal resources are, these are the ones that I usually get: hope and faith, love, self-awareness, a desire to learn, sense of safety. If I ask for external resources, they always give me things like friends and family, pets, music, money, water. So these are just some of the ones. You may have your own that aren't on this list, and that's good. But if you're constantly being traumatized at work or having the effects of trauma, remember that definition. Internal and external resources are inadequate to cope with the external threat. So ask yourself, all right, what are my resources? Let me look at the list that Darren provided, and then is there anywhere that I can add more to those resources? So that's one of the things I love about this, this type of using that definition. So let's talk about traumatic stress now. We know what trauma is, or the definition we're using. So traumatic stress is a normal reaction to a traumatic event. A normal, and I should highlight that and underline it and put in big bold letters, normal reaction. Because if we don't normalize this for this career field, we are going to continue to lose first responders at a much higher rate for suicide than they are from their job exposures, than if they're going to be shot at or car crashes, et cetera. We've got to normalize this. So what does normalizing this look like? Let's look at some of the normal emotional responses you may have to a traumatic event. One of the ones I'll key in on is shame. I should not feel this way. There is no such thing as I should not feel this way. You feel the way you feel, and your background and what you've been exposed to is going to shape that feeling. Just acknowledge them and say, it's okay for me to feel this way. The other thing I'll talk about before I ask Connie is guilt. The biggest thing for us perfectionists in this career field is I could have done more. I should have done more. Why didn't I do more? There's only so much we can do, folks. There's just things out there we cannot control. Connie, any you want to talk about?
I think the fear of, how I handled it or didn't handle it, fear of what other people thought about how I handled it, fear of what could happen to me, fear in how I'm feeling, and I don't like how I'm feeling, and again, comparing ourselves to others, and feeling fearful in that we're not measuring up, and that's all.
Thank you. So those are normal emotional responses. Normal physical responses: trembling or shaking. We watch an animal after they've just been chased, and you've heard this example 1,000 times, a dog, a raccoon, whatever it may be, they'll sit there and shake because they're getting all that adrenaline, all that hormones out of their system. We are too proud to do that. We don't want anybody to see us trembling or shaking, so we hide that. We try to keep that reaction set aside. But it's normal, folks. It is normal to feel that way. It is normal to have a lump in your throat. It is normal to cry. These are all normal physical responses if that's what you're having. Connie?
I agree. I don't have anything to add for this one.
Okay. I do want to close this with this. Why we keep on telling you that it's normal, but if they don't ease up and your nervous system kind of remains like stuck and can't move on for prolonged periods, short times it's normal. Prolonged periods, if it continues to go that way, you really do need to seek help, though, because you may need that professional guidance to help get you to start processing a little bit. So traumatic stress can be unsettling. People react in different ways to traumatic events. It's kind of like I told you, what affects one may not affect another. So if we want to assist in the process, we need to keep that in mind. We also need to ensure that we are not obsessively reliving that traumatic event. and we do that often because of the guilt. I should have handled it different, or the fear of, am I going to be in trouble the way I did handle it? So we relive it over and over, playing out all these different scenarios in our head. But the key one on this entire thing is that third one, ignoring your feelings. This is really going to slow your recovery. This is the part that really hurts people in these intercepts, because we have been told to ignore our feelings. We have been told from the time we came on this job to suck it up, buttercup. Don't ask for help. Don't let anyone see you react. They're going to think you're weak. They won't want to work with you. So please do not ignore your feelings. We're going to talk about that in the coming slides as well. So we talked about the normal reactions, what you should be looking for, and it's okay to feel the way you're feeling. Let's talk about some tools that can actually help you maybe get through some of these things a little bit quicker. I want you to minimize your media exposure, folks. If you live on Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, even LinkedIn nowadays, people have taken over with putting story after story after story on there. You do not need to read all these different versions. And if you decide to read them, please stay away from the comments because that's just going to help not let you move on as you watch the Monday morning quarterbacks talk about how we should have handled situations as opposed to what we had to do in that situation. Challenge your helplessness, volunteer for a cause. Remember, reaching out to help others. Volunteering is a good way to do that. Helps release that oxytocin, gives you a sense of control, gives you a support system that you can talk to. Eat a healthy diet. Sugary snacks and processed foods are our enemies. High-carb diet can actually worsen the symptoms, so try to find a way, especially after a very traumatic experience, to eat healthy for a little bit. Your body will thank you, and it will help you process a little bit easier. Connie, anything you want to add?
Nope, I think you did a great job.
All right, I'm going to turn this over to Connie. She has a little bit more on the healthy behavior she talked about.
Absolutely. So, again, we talked about a lot of these things. What I thought was helpful was just the everything on one page. And again, we know the importance of sleep. We don't need more than 7 to 8 hours of sleep, which again, when we're having difficulties, we may want to sleep all the time. And then obviously the others not getting enough sleep. Mindfulness, again, having very specific intention and paying attention and being present when we are with someone, not thinking about, the next 5 things I have to do, but being present with the person that we're with and not being distracted. And we talked about spirituality, and again, that is different than religiosity. There's certainly the practice of religion, but spirituality doesn't belong to any specific religion. It is about your connection with the world and what that looks like. Again, gratitude, we know that if we practice identifying 3 to 5 things we're grateful for every day, within 6 weeks, that begins to change our mind and how we look at things. So if you're looking for a more positive attitude or thought, look at doing a gratitude list. And again, we've both Darren and I have talked about caffeine and the importance of that. I thought that Martin Luther King said, our lives begin to end the day we become silent about the things that matter. And what, part of what Darren and I are trying to convey during this time is that these are all important things for you to be as healthy as you can be. And so, don't deny yourself because nobody's going to do it for you. And we need, as Darren said, we need each and every one of you doing what you're doing. And so take good care. So, Darren?
Okay, we are running really short on time, so I'm going to go very quickly through something that I think is really important because we each have different ways we handle the stress and the trauma we talked about and why it affects some and not others. There's a great definition for resilience that was in a book called Resilient School Leaders by Jerry Patterson and Paul Keller, I believe is his last name. And they say resilience is using your energy productively to emerge from adversity stronger than ever. So how can you do this? Well, there's a great tool called Mapping Your Resilience, and it's nothing more than this. Think of this gigantic snowflake, and you can look at this again on your PowerPoints later on, or you can get hold of me. And then on that snowflake, you're going to list things that are very important to you in your life, things that you're putting energy or effort towards. In my case, my wife, my children, my job, which is always going to be there, my exercise and my reading. And then looking at that chart, you would then chart how satisfied you are. 0, which is that center point, being very unsatisfied, to the end point, which is a 10, which is very satisfied. So on this one I did a couple of years ago, you can see my job was very high satisfaction, but my exercise and reading were very low satisfaction. Well, you need to know how much energy or effort you're putting towards something. So that's the last part of the exercise, where the width of the arrow will show you how much energy or effort you're putting towards there. So you have to use the width of an arrow to describe how much energy or effort you're putting towards that area. And then when you're done, it looks something like this. And you can see that exercise and reading, there was a reason that it was very low. I put no energy or effort towards it. Put a lot of energy or effort towards my job, though. And if I want to live a balanced life and not be like a tire that runs off the road, I have to be more balanced. And obviously, in this example, the best place would be to take some energy or effort for my job and to put it towards somewhere else. So we recommend you do this every 30 days. I'm sorry it's so quick, but feel free to email me and I'll get you the stuff and talk about a little bit more about it if you want to. Connie?
Yep. Thank you, Darren. So this is steps for everyone. So this is actually based on the 12 steps of Alcoholics Anonymous, but it's the 12 steps for everyone, not people who have alcohol problems. And the idea is that the 12 steps are a program for learning to live life on life's terms, not our terms, not trying to control things that we can't control, and to accept what we've done well and to make amends for things we haven't done well. I practice the 12 steps, and I actually believe the world would be a better place if everyone practiced the 12 steps. So, again, the cornerstone of the 12-step program is about the serenity prayer, grant me the serenity to accept the things I cannot change, the courage to change the things I can, and the wisdom to know the difference. And so, again, I think that this is, if you do this, you would be amazed at the changes in your life. So, again, here's the 12 steps circular, living in the present, one day at a time. We can't change the past, and we can do the footwork, but in many ways can't control the future. So we need to focus on one day at a time, which is today. And so the idea of practicing compassion and empathy, not only for others, but for ourselves, most importantly, practicing the golden rule. And you see how that then just continues to enhance your life. So, one of the things that I think is important, and Darren has touched on it, is we have got to figure out how to normalize asking for help. It is the same in the nursing profession. It's same in the medical profession as it is in law enforcement. Because of our perfectionistic tendencies, our thoughts that we don't need any help, we help everybody else. If anybody needs anything, they come to us, but we can't ask for help. And so I think it will take a village for us to begin to normalize asking for help. And so, I think that begins with each of us and how we act and what we do. I think it is important and essential for leaders in our organizations to talk about how they're feeling or when they've been stressed and how they handled it, or if they accessed counseling services. I think we need to be sure that in training programs we are making that normal and teaching new recruits about, it's okay to ask for help. And we need our insurance companies to pay for benefits. So if you want to get counseling, you can do that and not be fearful that it's going to negatively impact your job. It is going to take all of us for us to normalize being okay with asking for help. And if we don't do that, we're going to continue to lose more people, whether it's from suicide, whether it's from accidents, whatever the case may be, and certainly families that suffer because people need help and can't ask for it. So.
And what I'll talk about on this real quick is it is crucial that we start looking at department policies and state laws that change penalizing people for reaching out for help. In this career field, many people will be fired in some states and cities or departments if they reach out for help and their agency finds out about it. We have got to stop that. We want our people to survive and thrive in this career field, and especially in times like right now where it's not only just trauma, it's the stress that's related to everything, including the COVID situation. We have got to start working on getting those policies changed. The other thing is, some other things you can do is you can encourage communication. Talk about the call or scene. They're called micro debriefs after every serious call. I'll pull my people around a patrol car and say, let's talk about it real quick. And then I always start talking about the scene. I'll say, I don't know about you folks, but that scene made me very sad. It made me very angry. It made me scared, whatever it is, because as a leader, if I share my feelings and talk about the call, the chances of the other people following suit usually go up very greatly. So we don't want to ignore our feelings. We've talked about that. It delays the healing process. We want our folks to talk about how they're feeling about things.
And, you know, this is a feelings wheel. What I want to point out is in the center of the wheel are the main feelings about being happy, sad, angry, etc. But as you go out from the wheel, you will see other feelings described that kind of fall into that category. And so I think it's important for us to be able to clearly describe what our feelings are, and I hope that this wheel will allow you to do that. So please feel free to use it in any way you see fit.
Other examples are encourage the self-care. We talked about the Proqual and the balance wheel and how often you should do that. Make it safe for your folks to ask for help. EAP is great. Maybe most agencies should have it, as well as peer support. The big thing is on EAP is make sure you request a counselor that's specialized in first responders or trauma. In the state of Missouri, we've actually developed a database of providers who have specialized in first responders, and they have to they meet with us quarterly, and we do training with them, and they have to do ride-alongs so they understand what a first responder goes through and corrections and dispatch, and you don't get stuck with a marital counselor who has no idea when you reach out for EAP. Other resources, peers, family, friends. There's programs that are free of charge, like Save a Warrior and My Battle Within. They are both free for military veterans and first responders, which most people on this webinar are. I will put the websites in the chat area. Pause First project is a great project, and they have a learning academy. So go to all these things that I put in the chat, and if you want to learn more information regarding them.
And these are just some of the what should be in basic training core principles. Codependency, while people see that as a weakness, that is tied very closely to perfectionism. And so looking at that and control and esteeming ourselves. The assertiveness training, is not only about standing up for yourself, but it's also about advocacy and being appropriate in how we do stand up for ourselves. Feeling our feelings, what we can control, all the things that we've already talked about, certainly the asking for help. And again, kind of to encompass all of these things are important. What I would hope is that if we looked at everybody's to-do list for today, you had at least one, if not two or three things on that list that were for yourself and not for, work or anybody else. We have to make ourselves a priority. And then this is one of my favorite sayings: today is the only day in all the days that will ever be. But what will happen in all of the other days depends on what you do today. Thank you very much for your attention today. I appreciate the opportunity to be here.
Thank you for me as well. We're going to turn it back over to our wonderful host. Sorry we were so rushed and we had a lot of info. Feel free to reach out to both Connie and myself, and we'll give you everything we can or answer any questions you have that we may not have time for today. So, Lisa, we'll turn it back to you, I think.
Thank you, Darren and Connie. Thanks very much for that presentation. A lot of great comments in the comment chat section and the Q&A as you were talking. So if you have any questions right now, if you would please put them in the Q&A pod. If we have too many to answer before our time runs out, we will ask the speakers today to respond to them, and we'll distribute those answers. If you would please, those of you who are on the line, if you would respond to the poll question about additional topics that you might find helpful that relate to the topic presented today, please answer that and any other information you might like. Next slide, please. Okay. This is a resource that we have available to you that's related to today's webinar. You can see a window coming up that is a file transfer window that you can download this document. If you click the file, it should turn blue, and then the download button should turn a darker gray, and you can download that document. It's entitled Tips for the Healthcare Professionals Coping with Stress and Compassion Fatigue. There's also, let's see, there's also a certificate of participation that you can download. Just as a reminder, this is not for CEUs, but it's just for your own personal portfolio that you attended today's webinar. And as I remind you to answer the poll, if you would, please. I know there's a lot going on as we wrap this up. If you haven't joined the Gaines Center's listserv, we invite you to do that. This is where all of our webinars are announced, as well as other technical assistance opportunities. We have monthly newsletters that we highlight programs across the country and other tips and information for you. So here is the link to subscribing to the Gaines listserv, and the link is case sensitive. So if you cut it and paste it and put it into your browser, make sure that you have it done appropriately. I encourage you to sign up. As I said, there's a lot of really great information that's in that in our solicitations that are released throughout the year. Thank you again for participating in today's event. If you have any other questions or comments, the Gaines Center's direct contact is on this website, and you can either contact us by phone or by email and by going to the website. And we encourage you to do that. Any additional questions that you have on this topic or others, we'd be happy to address them. So I want to thank everyone for participating. And I think we have a couple of minutes left, and I think let me open up the questions here.
And I did see one about the places I talked about. If you they're in the chat area, but if you need those websites, feel free to email me, and I'll send you as much information as I can as well.
There we go. Lots of thank yous to our presenters for such a great presentation. The PowerPoint, as Amelia responded, and others, we will release these. We have to have them prepared for 508 compliance and others, and we'll send them to everyone who registered for the webinar. You received the recording, which will include the slides. The link to the test that was mentioned, I will put it in the chat box or in the response here, but the ProQOL has its own website, which is just that, proqol.org, and it's available for your use. So with that, I will close the webinar and thank you and have a really great afternoon.